Cellar. Hope you all had a nice Thanksgiving and been enjoying this past week. Getting ready for the Christmas season, if that's what you celebrate. Or Samhain, or whatever. We'll start right in. What do you think the state of D&D would be if Gary had kept controlling interest in it all this time and is still around us? And there's a response to that before I get to mine. This is a difficult question because we don't know the possibilities. The game is currently coming down from a spike in popularity, and the settings have been mainly based on an adaptation from Ed Greenwood and his influential World Vision. The rules for the current edition are best described as inflated gaming in all of its aspects, benefiting the players to grow power hungry for more abilities, which is blurring classes and at a rapid pace of leaps and bounds. The setting of Forgotten Realms and manuals, iconic monsters are the only things worth holding on to for future editions. As for Gary, I think he would pop the bloated mass which is currently glorified. Well, having talked to a couple of the people that work with Gary on his last projects and worked with him creating other stuff, I don't think I'd like his final vision. If you look at Legendary Adventures, his last work, he was going to a system that was all skills and perceptions and abilities. And that's where the people I've talked to think that he was headed. Now, personally, I wouldn't have cared for that. I don't think he'd have suffered the bloat, but I think he'd have taken a certain amount of the aspect out of the game that I find I wouldn't like to miss. And there's something else gets mentioned here later, as I recall. It also addresses that. Love your comments on 5e. Spot on, mate. Would love to hear your thoughts on Dungeon Crawl Classics. I love it. When I first saw a DCC funnel game, I thought, wow, this is really what it was like in the old days. When you had a farm boy fresh in off the farm, he's got a rusty old hand sickle for a weapon, and you're out to make your fortune. And yes, that's the way we used to start them. The funnel game really captures what I think the essence of what was fun about the early days of role-playing in D&D. And that is, number one, you start a funnel game. You're advised to start a funnel game with at least 12 or 15 character sheets already filled out with names. Now, one thing I love about this is this obviously precludes you from writing 15 bullshit backstories for, one for each of these people, because they weren't going to be around long enough to warrant the effort. The funnel is like, okay, he's dead, let's go for the next one. And whichever character was on the top of your pile that survived when it was all over, he became a level 1, and off you went into the next adventure. The disposability of player characters, that was very old school. Don't get too attached. They might not be here tomorrow. I like a lot of the simplified approach that DCC uses, and I think it catches a lot of the wondrous fun aspect of role-playing with a low-level character. I like it. Would you happen to know why clerics have a chart for turning undead instead of simply having any undead in the cleric's immediate vicinity make a saving throw, save versus spell perhaps, to resist the turn attempt? Well, I know Gary wanted his clerics to be powerful. He wanted them to have one innate ability, and that was to be able to turn undead. Now, if I were to approve on that, I would have tweaked it to say that it would have been automatic if the undead were of an opposite alignment, or, for instance, a good cleric turning back zombies that want to eat your brain. Giving a saving throw to the undead, nah, I don't like that so much. I mean, good Lord, anything that can level drain you, especially level drain you 2 levels, is way scary enough that only a high level cleric can do it, and anybody else should just run. Gary wanted his clerics to be kind of noble, kind of Friar Tuck without the drunkenness, perhaps. Shades of Bishop Odo, the brother of William the Conqueror, who went around smiting the enemies of his brother, and therefore the enemies of the Catholic Church, because they were all pagan Saxons to begin with. That's why. No, I don't think undead should have a saving throw. I think if you've got some particularly special individual undead, or a bare handful of minions that might be more resistant to that on a special case basis, okay. But a medium level cleric ought to be able to just flick off a bunch of ghosts or other undeads that would be bad news if he wasn't there. That's why. That's what I know of why it was done that way. Did I ever play any version of Hero Quest, the board game? If you did, what do you think of the new revised? I've always wanted to try it, but something about the old chunky one-piece minis is much more endearing to me than the incredibly detailed ones they produced for this new version. Well, no, I've never played it. The only reason I read this question is the latter part is about the minis that are coming out now in particularly Kickstarter games. I have a friend who has the wherewithal to buy into any Kickstarter that's got really what he considers to be great minis. Sometimes the games are good. Sometimes the minis are the best part of it. The minis, really great sculpted minis, can be very appealing, particularly some of the high quality plastic ones. Escape from Dulce is the first one that comes to my mind that had some really great minis that went with the game. Scythe has some good minis. There's other games that have it, that have them. But for most people, that's just eye candy. For us true old grogs, we could play with 2 clumps of clay. Anyway. Ornate location. Okay, question. Ornate location descriptions versus the elephant/monster in the room. Did you ever run into this amusing cliche in RPGs? DM recites an intricate room description that takes 5 minutes, long list of furnishings, and then at the end it's, oh, and there's a 9-foot manticore sitting in the room about to eat your face. This can be tricky because how does one simulate the experience of entering the room with an obvious horrible danger in it? Question 2, is it okay to describe some of the contents as well as the monster, or is it better to just point out the danger and only inform about the contents if the PC asks? That's a fair question. No, No, I wouldn't go into a 5-minute room description of the wonders of the room and say, oh yeah, and here's something that's going to eat your face. Adventurers, now I may be making assumptions here, but adventurers are supposed to be on alert. They're supposed to be looking for the unusual. Even if they haven't run across a certain creature, monster, it's a good chance that they would produce a unique scent, whether it's their droppings, their bodies, whatever. Now, it doesn't stand to reason that the adventurers have to know, oh yes, those are manticore turds we're smelling. Just that, man, we're smelling something we haven't run into before, or something strange or whatever. It's just really nasty to go on and on and on about describing something in, oh yes, unless the circumstance warrant. Now, if it's something in this room, area, enclosure, if it's large and it's not extremely well lit like a laboratory or something, then you could assume that the party goes in and they start looking around. You can assume that they might start on the left wall and say, okay, what do we see? Or they might ask, what do we see dead ahead? And it, again, depending upon size and distance and ever, would shape how you would answer that. I would never do it last unless it was something that was hiding in that last dark corner as you were studying the room or the area or the chamber or whatever from a distance. Or I might describe part of it. Party goes in, starts looking. They get back to a place in the back or over in a corner or something where they couldn't have seen from the door. Yeah, I might spring something on them then. But I think it's poor DMing to look for opportunities to spring stuff on your group cold like that, with a couple possible exceptions. And they would be tempered by how nasty is what you spring on them. But if they've been kind of playing lackadaisical, la-di-da, then yeah, every once in a while a reality check is entirely justified. Entirely justified. But, again, you gotta study your circumstance and your setting and decide, does a vicious, ugly surprise? Now, if it's something that's cleverly camouflaged, if it's a mimic or something like a mimic or whatever, well, hey, you can spring that on them anytime you want. If they don't see the lurker above because you just simply said it's kind of dark and shadowy up there, and they don't do anything but a cursory glance, well, that's up to you, and it's up to the perception level of your group. But that's just me and the way I play. I would only go into contents after the threat has been dealt with. Now, if the threat being dealt, let me think here. Trying to phrase this right so it makes sense. Doesn't sound like an idiot. If the level of the threat warrants it, is kind of what, if it's something really horrible and terrible and is not something that normally hides, well, no, you shouldn't hide that on them. But, hey, a poisonous snake or a scorpion or whatever in a pile of rubbish that they're rooting through over there, it's fair to spring that on them. It's kind of a, do it by the circumstance. I see behind me that our traditional Swedish tree is flickering. Well, it's not really. Must be the rate of refresh on the screen and the cycles of the bulbs or something like that. Because believe me, I would not have a tree that flashed at me like that. I play 5e on occasion since so many people around me prefer it as it's the best, and I do think it's the best WotC version of the game, but that doesn't say all that much. If I ever end up running 5e again, I'm removing the perception skill, a terrible thing among many that 3rd edition introduced was the spot and listen skills, enduring as perception. Leads to players just turning their brain off. When I walk into a new room and ask the DM, what do I see, I don't want him to respond, make a perception check. And I sure don't want, when I inevitably roll a 1 or less if my character has bad wisdom, for them to have to fail to see something in plain sight right in front of me. I remember years ago playing with some younger folks, new to role-playing, and with their impression of the game so conditioned by constantly rolling dice for everything, one of them rolled the d20 one time just to walk down a hallway, unprompted by the DM, just because they assumed they needed to. Yeah, isn't that the trick? The balance between, yeah, it happened, and ooh, maybe it didn't. Lots of mundane things I don't require rolls for. Every once in a while I may just throw one in to confuse them so that they're less likely to realize that the next time I ask for it, it's serious. You don't want your players rolling for everything. Now that said, when I do the Rule of Blame, I do make them roll all their own dice, simply because the whole vibe of the Wheel of Blame is it's not my fault. And so they roll their own 2 hits. When they get hit, they roll their own damage. When they hit, they roll the damage inflicted. And when they get cured or healed, especially through a potion, they roll their own effectiveness. And of course, whenever it's my table and they roll like a 2 or a 3 on a cure, it's like, oh, must have been past their expiration date. But then again, it adds a different level to the game because you're using this, you're using your dice, and 1 minute you're looking for a high roll, and the next minute you're looking for a low roll. I think switching it up like that just makes it a lot more fun, and it kind of ramps up the tension level in a good way. Okay, he's referring to my comment on third-party material. Third-party content will always keep a game alive. The OSR has a group of publishers and a larger group of independent creators constantly making new things or improving on the old, and the community is still alive and well. Power by the Apocalypse games are in the same situation. This also extends to video games. Skyrim and Mountain Blade have so many mods created by people. Those 2 games still have tons of people playing them a decade after release. Morrowind and Neverwinter Nights are 2-decade-old RPGs that still have a lot of people playing them. If you let your fans maintain and contribute to the game, its spirit will live on forever. Yep. And as a case in point, not mentioned here, is a fantasy game called Age of Wonders. It came out in the first, and then it came out in the second, and then it came out in the third. Now, between the time it was the second and the third, it was an orphan for a while. Got picked up. Then it was an orphan for a long time. Had a huge fan base, myself amongst them. And what made 3, the third iteration, so great was it had an editor which allowed you to create your own. They called them maps, but gamers, war gamers particularly, would call them scenarios. And the amount of creativity you could put into this, that creation was almost limitless. And the maps you could paint were just stunning because of the graphic set available. Now, it became an orphan for a long time, but the fan base was such that they kept it alive on various websites, and the game was modded heavily. Now, I didn't play every mod because I wasn't familiar with every game, but I understand that there was a mod that allowed you to play Red Bear, White Moon. By putting in this mod, they all were dressed appropriately and the correct monsters for that game set and what have you. What I do know is that somebody whose screen handle was Dwiggs, 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 produced the Dwiggs mod, which amongst us that played the game was legendary. It had just thoroughly improved the game, closed up some bug holes, and was thousands and thousands of people were playing the Dwiggs mod. Now, this is a game that's been technically dead for a couple, 3 years. And finally, there was going to be a patch come out. Now, the game community, the players, had already patched it a couple, 3 times themselves, every time improving. And the Dwiggs mod being revamped was what literally got me back in gaming. I'd been playing the computer game. I'd been on boards and whatever, corresponding with other people, and came in contact with and made friends with an individual that was updating the Dwiggs mod to fit this newest patch. And would I be interested in doing some of this? Because I'd been doing what they called maps for a while now, and they were being very well received, both from the painting of them that I did, as well as the interesting ideas. And anyway, I said, well, I don't know. And he sent me some sprites, the little drawings of the pixelated drawings of the creatures. And I looked at them and I knew who they were without him telling me, and I statted them out. And I sent them all back within a couple of hours. And he was, are you kidding me? I go, no, I forgot this was here. And so I got heavily involved in the Dwiggs mod, and we created new races and new magic items and all monsters, all kinds of things. So yeah, and then now the 4th iteration is out, and you can't edit this stuff anymore in 4th edition. However, it's still a great game to play. So I absolutely believe in the power of third party. Absolutely. Age of Wonders is proof positive. And it will keep a game alive if the game was good to begin with. Another response, similar, I think you're right about the importance of third-party products. It seemed to me that the strength of RPGs is that they offer the opportunity for anyone to be creative, for everyone to come up with remarkable ideas, for everyone to bounce their ideas off of other ideas in unique ways. Third-party offerings are the natural outcome of that core truth about RPGs. I suspect that a mega corporation like Hasbro might want to try to somehow control all that enthusiastic creativity so that they can profit from it. But DIY is part of RPG's DNA. Absolutely. Every one of those first books says, find the ideas where you will, change what you like. Always has been. I believe and hope that any effort to stamp out third-party D&D products or corral them within an online or corporate holding pen will have a poor outcome for the perpetrator. I agree. I don't think. I think that Hasbro would be giant, colossal, corporate boobs and fools if they tried to do that. I don't think they have too many of the aforementioned on their payroll. But hey, times change, weird things happen. Yeah, role-playing games spur creativity, not just in DMs, but also in players. If more youngsters played them, think of how far we could open up their minds. I had Gamma World, and my group played it. One adventure, they went from Chicago to Utah. When they got there, they were forced to play soccer, and the losers die. Well, I'll be honest with you. I never had any idea that Utah was what you call a soccer hotbed. Though I'm sure it was some played in Utah when they had the Salt Lake City. No, those were Winter Olympics. Anyway, I do think dying is a rather rash result for losing a match. I don't know about you, but I am a soccer fan of long standing. And I coach kids and refereed and all that kind of stuff when my kids were little. And this time of year for me, World Cup going on, is just, I can't tape enough of the games. Because, damn it, ABC won't show enough of them at one time. They're deciding who to see and who not to see. And hey, maybe I wanted to see these two guys play. But if ABC didn't think so, well, screw you, you're out of luck. And I'm not going to pay for another streaming service just so I can watch every game. No, that kind of defeats the whole deal. Yeah, it's kind of a harsh result. Red card, which means you get your head cut off. Whoa, I'll bet there'd be a whole hell of a lot fewer of them. What are your favorite books? Oh, Lord. I can't possibly. My favorite books are very well written, with either a brand new slant on something or a new take altogether or something new altogether. I talk often enough about right now I'm reading a series of big books by, I believe it's a gentleman, I'd assume, Django Wexler. Django Wexler, Wexler, The Shadow Kingdoms. It's a very good series. My favorite book's the one I'm reading right now, followed by others, obviously. But I read so much and so many different things that I don't know. Did you ever play Gary Gygax's Dragon Chess? No. The 60s had a lot of sci-fi TV shows. Did you have a favorite? Yeah, The Twilight Zone. I just loved The Twilight Zone. I didn't watch Lost in Space, and I didn't get into Star Trek until right around the time I got married in 1970. And watching reruns every night at dinner, out living in Puget Sound, on Puget Sound, not in it. Those were my favorites from back then. Where did the idea of dwarven ponies come from? Okay, back in the hairy old days, peering back through the mists of time. In the spirit of the game, that we were constantly saying, hey, it's fantasy. Run with it. Create your own worlds. Someone that had a connection to the amateur press at the time, probably Alarms and Excursions, but I'm not certain. We looked at so many of them back then. They had decided that in their world, the dwarves had taken to raising a pony that was completely at home underground. Well, that meant that adventurers now, were they able to procure one of these, had a pack animal that they could take underground. We didn't care for that idea a whole lot. It kind of skewed the idea of adventuring and, adventuring outdoors as opposed to adventuring indoors. And, everything that hit the vanity press back then, the fanzines, everything that hit almost everything would be automatically, eagerly lapped up at the trough of innovation and applied to games. And sometimes they were good ideas and sometimes they weren't, and this one wasn't. So, as dwarven ponies all of a sudden were available in every horse market in every town and every campaign, I decided that we needed to curtail them, and what better than the boule who had a fondness for dwarven ponies and would therefore thin the herd, so to speak. And they did, from what I hear. Okay. There's been a recent, let me make sure I've got everything here. I didn't miss a page because I hate doing that and finding it out afterwards. Okay, that's third pony, dwarven ponies. Okay. In the past week, there has come up another subject that has purists, a great many of the so-called purists, it's got their pennies tied in a knot. And I'm not using woke as a pejorative in this case, but with the wokeness realization spreading, Hasbro has said apparently that they're no longer going to use the word race to describe humans or orcs or dwarves or anything like that. Now, I went on goodoldictionary.com because they generally have a real good working man's definition of anything. I don't go to the OED or Webster's or Funk and Wagnalls or anything like that. I like goodoldictionary.com. And they describe, their explanation of race is that it's been used to refer to a group of people who share certain characteristics, such as skin color. However, genetic evidence has proved that such groupings are not a scientific or biological classification for categories of humans. The term is still commonly used to generally refer to groups of people that share a skin color, heritage, origin, culture, or similar characteristics. This sense of race is an arbitrary label that lumps people together and is not scientific. Now they want to use the word species. Well, some people are screaming, a few, not a lot yet, or at least I'm not seeing them yet, are screaming that species is too modern a word. What's that got to do with a fantasy game? Now, going back to goodoldictionary.com, a class of individuals having some common characteristics or qualities, distinct sort or kind, and in a biological term, the major subdivision of a genus or subgenus, regarded as the basic category of biological classification, composed of related individuals that resemble one another, are able to breed among themselves, but are not able to breed with members of another species. Well, what do you know? There goes all that half crap. Now, if that's what Hasbro's on the way to do, Yay! I applaud them heartily. I doubt it, though. They'd rather cater to the people that want to play an amped up character because they're half this or half that or, whatever. Be that as it may. I like the idea here about not able to breed with any member of another species. Now, the general crap I've seen on Facebook is, oh, good, that'll make elves distinct from humans. Well, I always thought they were. Now, if they can't interbreed, okay. Or now, if you're going to allow it to happen once in a while, but it has a magical background or reason, or okay. But let's crowd out all the half this, half that's. Now, another thing during this conversation is this designation 1 D&D. 1? What are they? They Sauron now? 7 rings and 1 to bind them? Actually, this would be D&D 7. There's original. And then there's 5 editions, 1st through 5th, and now there's a new one. So that would make them D&D 7. 1 D&D sounds a little haughty and pretentious. But then again, a lot of what the wizards do, to me, seems haughty and pretentious. I believe they have failed in some instances to avoid the pitfalls that Gary and I were very, very rigorous in avoiding, and that is thinking of ourselves sitting high on some mountain, eating ambrosia, sipping ambrosia, eating mana, whatever, and pronouncing from on high. Now, I found another, as I was going through species, and that is the species, the human race, or humankind. Let's use kind. Orc kind. Hobbit kind, or halfling, or, whatever you have to use. Humankind, elf kind, dwarven kind, orc kind, goblin kind. Yeah, I can be okay with that. I don't give a damn what they end up abbreviating it as. I'm really just sitting on the sidelines eating popcorn watching the clown show as people argue about what it ought to be and what it oughtn't to be and what does this mean and yada, 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 yada. I understand that some people seem to think that some of the monsters created back in the day were surrogates for minorities. Horse shit. None of the ones I ever had anything to do. If I thought they had been, I'd have altered them and edited them to where they didn't on anything that I worked on. Horse shit. I understand that they want to be more sensitive. Okay. That's fine. But species is a little cut and dry and a little scientific sounding. However, kind, tacked on as a suffix, is just as descriptive, in some cases more. And if the kinds can't interbreed, fine. Let's get rid of all the shit that's infiltrated the game. Half dragonborn, half elf, half orc. Sheesh. Half of the halves would probably be the result of a rape or some god-awful scientific experiment. Well, I guess if that's your bag, that's your bag. not mine. So, as this all shakes out, it'll be interesting to see what terms and words are finally accepted as the acceptable, whatever. Nothing's written in stone yet. But I would like to, if there's any wizards, people listening, to think about using the suffix kind. Might work for you. In the meantime, the season is upon us. I'm getting ready to run some games here locally in January. Before then, of course, we'll have the holidays. And there's always neat new games coming out this time of the year. Don't forget, got the Patreon, got the Curmudgeon in the Cellar podcast. Subscribe to this video. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And until the next time, Dodada Govi. Hello, and welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. ESR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.